What is going on, trainers? DrumVillain here, bringing you some more Pokemon Go PvP content, and the new season is here. The last season of Go Battle League is finally over, so if you haven't been to the battle screen yet, make sure to pop a star piece before you do to get a massive bonus to the dust that you get for the end of the season. If you've pretty much made your way to rank 20 or any rank above that, you're going to get an absolutely huge chunk of Stardust. For the end of the season, it's worth popping a star piece for. It's one of the single largest amounts of Stardust you'll ever get at a single time in Pokemon Go, so definitely worth taking advantage of. There's also another free ticket in the game shop for the Go Battle League season wins track. You know, you get 5 pages of winning up to 100 matches on each page, and you get big chunks of Stardust, TMs, you get a couple of elite TMs in it as well. It's definitely, if you play Go Battle League, and if you're here watching this video, I assume you do, you want to pick up that research because it is worth it for the rewards over the season. Even if you don't play that hardcore, maybe you'd only do it kind of casually every now and again, it is worth picking up that research because that Stardust does add up, and it's the one thing that we all can't get enough of, is enough Stardust for building these Pokemon for these teams. I myself finished the season at Legend rank, so I got 200,000 dust, buffed to 300,000 with a star piece, which is very, very nice. My actual ELO rating though was around 2,700 at the end of the season, and this usually happens to me at the end of the season of Go Battle League. I get in the last couple of weeks, I get very casual with it. I try out some random wacky Pokemon, random teams, and tend to get absolutely annihilated for it, because if you're anywhere near Legend rank in the last couple of weeks, people get very serious about trying to make their pushes to Legend rank, which is obviously fair enough. People got to get on that grind and try and make that Legend rank push, but it is punishing to be trying out anything slightly spicy or anything different, so definitely tanked a few 100 points there, but I'm not too stressed about that. I'm certainly not a end of season leaderboard chaser by any measure. And here we are, always trying to find new Pokemon to use, new strategies, new team lineups, new effective ways of climbing in the rankings that sometimes are some of the top tier, most meta strategies, and sometimes we're trying to find things outside the box, come up with something a little bit creative to counter what's currently popular in each cup and each meta, and still making that push up to Legend rank each season. So if you're interested in that, keeping up with it, be sure to hit the subscribe button, and let's get into the nitty-gritty of this video, and that is going to be the move updates for this season. Now, I'm not going to linger too long on the actual overall spread of these new moves they've added, because every season, as you're probably aware at this point, Niantic does shake up the move pools for PvP specifically to try and keep the meta fresh, interesting. They're trying to balance PvP and make it as kind of accessible, but also trying to, you know, give new Pokemon a chance to shine and things like that, and trying to create new core breakers for popular teams. And this season's changes are honestly a little bit underwhelming. Last season, they obviously made Wing Attack stronger, and that made a huge change to the meta. Things like Pelipper that I'm using here today, and Noctowl, and a few other Pokemon. Charizard got such huge buffs from this move, and they completely began to dominate, especially the Great League meta, very, very heavily. And they haven't really done anything to specifically counter that. They're more sidestepping that a little bit, but I found these changes underwhelming, to be quite honest, and from what I've seen on the Twitter space and other places like that, it seems like a lot of people agree that it is just a bit of a really a non-starter in terms of updates for the most part. There are a couple of interesting things, and a couple of them here that I kind of want to address and talk about, but I'm specifically going to be talking about whether they need the moves. So first off, they've gave Boom Burst, which was Noivern's Community Day charge move, to a few more Pokemon, including Exploud, which is probably the most, I would say, the most interesting Pokemon to get a hold of it, just because it's Stab, but also Exploud doesn't really have the move set to really utilize it all that much. Anyway, I would say. They've given Surf to Jellicent. They've given Melmetal its signature move, which is Double Iron Bash, which they've actually put behind a paywall. For now, it's on a $5 ticket, £5 ticket, wherever you are in the world. It's about a $5 in terms of British money, at least. And you can only evolve Melmetal with the move if you've bought the ticket. And you can only get Melmetal with the move. I think at some point it'll probably be on Elite TMs. As of me recording this, you cannot get a Double Iron Bash with an Elite TM. And I don't currently have a Double Iron Bash Melmetal. So I figured maybe, rather than talking about the new moves and using them specifically, I wanted to take another look at Melmetal and Jellicent without Double Iron Bash and Surf, and just show what they can do without these moves. Now, don't get me wrong, Surf on Jellicent is quite interesting. It does allow it to, I believe, beat Bastiodon in the 0 and 2 shields, which is quite a nice matchup to pick up, because Bastiodon is still gradually increasing in popularity as more and more people do build that XL Pokemon, because it is still just so insanely broken, especially with its main targets being these wing attack users that have been dominating the meta so heavily. But I decided to go for an Ice Beam, Shadow Ball, Jellicent running Hex as its fast move, and going for Melmetal with Rock Slide and Superpower, which is its kind of go-to Great League moveset before Double Iron Bash has been brought in. And this is just going to give you guys a bit of an idea what to expect from them. Maybe it'll help sway you a little bit. Maybe you're thinking about the Melmetal ticket and thinking, oh, I really want Double Iron Bash on my Melmetal to use it in PvP. And maybe this will make you think twice about that. Just, you know, at some point this move's probably going to be available without paying £5 for it. So don't worry too much about it. Don't let the FOMO get to you if you're not feeling it particularly, because honestly this does feel a little bit like Niantic's trying to add extra paywalls to legacy moves, which they already did with Elite TMs. They've already done this, so why are they trying to do it more and again? I'm not sure, but I don't really agree with it. But being a content creator, I have bought the ticket myself for transparency, and I am probably going to end up at some point using a Double Iron Bash Melmetal. You know, don't want to lie to you guys and say I've not bought it, but I understand why people don't want to buy it. It's just obviously if you're making content, you're in kind of a unique position to be pressured to pick up the new things to showcase for, you know, the players that want to see what's happening with it and stuff like that. Now, Melmetal has always had a staple place in PvP since its inception, really, because it's been kind of accessible. It's had some play in all three leagues, but especially in the Ultra League. Originally, it was very, very strong. It was utilised to shut down the Articunos early on in Go Battle League, as well as being able to, like, well, not really deal with Cresselia as such. It's a very even matchup, which is quite surprising, but it's had a strong play in the Ultra League and had some play in the Great League, and it kind of dropped off in popularity when Registeel got rebuffed because they did originally nerf it a little bit because it was so strong in the Great League, and then it's picked up in popularity in the Ultra League since XL Pokemon got released, and obviously with having access to Zap Cannon and stuff like that, it's really dropped off because if you're going to run Melmetal, it seems that Registeel is the preferred Pokemon of choice. So, Double Iron Bash is a cross-chop clone. If you're familiar with Machamp and its spammy cross-chop charge moves in PvP, then this is looking very similar to that. It's only 4 Thundershocks, I believe, to get to it, with it being 35 energy, which makes it incredibly spammy, but it is a steel-type move. And in competitive Pokemon Go and competitive Pokemon on the wider spectrum, you often find that steel damage output isn't always the best thing to have. It's not the most versatile offensive typing. It's resisted by water, which I think is probably the biggest drawback that I find personally trying to use things that have steel fast and charge moves, is the water types can really be a problem because waters are so common in general. There's a lot of water type Pokemon out there, so having all those Pokemon resisting that damage isn't ideal. And you might think, well, it's super spammy, and spammy moves tend to be a little bit better overall in PvP. They tend to have more play, they're more fun to use. And the problem with this, with Melmetal, is that it's already spammy. It's got Superpower, it's got Rock Slide, they're fantastic moves. And if you want a little bit more oomph in terms of steel damage, you do have access to Flash Cannon if you really want to run that on it. And Cross Chop is great for spamminess, with something like Machamp, where it's got quite low bulk and it's not going to be in there very long, so you want the charge moves to be coming out pretty fast and hard, but Melmetal doesn't really have the full offensive capabilities to make full use of that. Like, consider that Alolan Ninetales, which is Fairy and Ice type, is double weak to Steel. So you'd imagine that a charge move that's double super effective from something that's a little bit attack weighted, like Melmetal, would obliterate Alolan Ninetales, and you'd be wrong. Alolan Ninetales can survive a Double Iron Bash from Melmetal. Now, if it's a Shadow Alolan Ninetales, that's probably a slightly different story, but you're going to be in an awkward position of trying to Thundershock down an Alolan Ninetales by landing 1 Iron Bash, or going to be pressured to land 2 of them, and in that case, you're in the same boat as running Rock Slide anyway. You might as well just be running Rock Slide, hit it with 2 Rock Slides, and you've got that better versatile coverage of the Rock Slide for hitting the flyers for super effective damage, hitting Skarmory for neutral, whereas Double Iron Bash is going to be resisted. And the way I see it, in the Great League and the Ultra League, Melmetal is competing directly with Registeel and Galarian Stunfisk for the similar kind of coverage, you know, because they're all potentially other steel killers with Focus Blast and Earthquake and Superpower between them, and they're all also anti-flyer, with Zap Cannon on Registeel, Rock Slide on both Melmetal and Galarian Stunfisk. And they're all anti-Charmers because they're natural steel typing, so they all fill a similar role. And honestly, you can kind of pick and choose between the three for what your team kind of specifically needs, but they are very much weighed up against each other in most team building scenarios. And does Double Iron Bash make Melmetal preferable to those two in any situation? And the answer is almost unanimously no, it is not better. It doesn't make Melmetal preferable to Registeel or Galarian Stunfisk in any way that it wasn't before. Honestly, my opinion on Double Iron Bash is that it should be stronger. It can afford to be more energy to damage efficient, which for those not familiar with some of the more nitty-gritties of how people talk about Pokemon Go battle movesets, it's referring to how much energy the move costs versus its base damage, and this varies wildly between different moves, and that efficiency for charge moves really determines what charge moves are worthwhile and which ones aren't. So for example, the Community Day moves Blast Burn and Hydro Cannon and Frenzy Plant are very efficient in terms of energy to damage, which mean that they're very, very strong for how much time they take to get to. Like Leaf Blade is the single most energy efficient charge move in the game, I do believe. And this is a unique move for Melmetal, so it wouldn't seem unfair to make the move stronger and comparable to these kind of moves. It should be similar because it's a special move, and it should be special for it to have it. And they're putting it behind a paywall as well, it just seems silly to make it underwhelming. Like, what's the point in even giving it its signature move if it's not going to be any good? I mean, at least with like Aerial Blast on Lugia and Sacred Fire and Ho-Oh, they have unique gameplay. They add unique avenues to how to play both Lugia and Ho-Oh, and most often it's worth having those moves on them. It makes them stronger for having them because they are either exceedingly powerful or the effects they have are very unique, and that should be the same for Double Iron Bash. It should just be a stronger move. Overall, it doesn't make it better than Registeel or Galarian Stunfisk, so in my conclusion, you do not want Double Iron Bash on this thing. There's very few situations where it's going to help you out. You might as well settle for Superpower, settle for Rock Slide, and save yourselves an Elite TM down the line, or save yourself some money now if you're not particularly fussed about the Professor Willow outfit and you're not kind of feeling that same FOMO pressure to have this move and have this research that everyone else has currently got access to. And I say everybody else, it's not everybody else. It's just a handful of people that are buying this ticket. And honestly, you can see in a lot of these matches that I'm showing here now that it does just fine without Double Iron Bash. It really doesn't improve its gameplay in a way that I can see. I'm not looking at these matchups and thinking, oh, well, this actually would be a lot better to have Double Iron Bash. Melmetal does exactly what it's going to do anyway, just fine without the move. So definitely don't stress too heavily on it. In fact, you're better off without it. Like, Melmetal's very, very strong. The only interesting league where it might have a bit more nuanced play might be the Open Master League, because Galarian Stunfisk and Registeel aren't up there competing in the same way, and therefore Melmetal's got a bit more of a unique role to play, and also the fairies are a little bit more prominent up there. Things like Zacian are more prominent up there, but also you can run Flash Cannon for that already. You're going to have to land, I imagine, quite a few Double Iron Bashers on Zacian to knock it out, so it's not really going to shift that matchup all that much. You've still got to be scared to death of that close combat from Zacian, so it's not really going to improve that matchup all that well anyway. And in a lot of situations, there are still flyers in the Open Master League: Lugia, Ho-Oh, Yveltal, things like that, and Rock Slide's really going to come in handy there. Superpower's still going to come in handy for the things like Dialga, and even to kind of help you out against like Excadrill, and for some neutral damage against Metagross. So I don't think Double Iron Bash is worth it, even in the Master League, but I think that's where it's going to have slightly more interesting play to look at. And obviously this is all just my personal opinion on the move itself. You're very welcome to get down in the comments and tell me that I'm being an idiot, that I'm wrong, and tell me why, because I'm interested to hear other people's perspective on this move, to be honest. But like I said, I'm just a bit underwhelmed by it myself personally, and I want it to be good. I want Melmetal to see a bit of a resurgence in popularity. I think it's a very cool Pokemon, and I don't want it to just be Registeel forever in the Great League and the Ultra League that we see as the Steel Titan that's going to be taking everything on and filling that role. But Surf on Jellicent I see as a different story, to be honest, whereas Double Iron Bash I don't see as strictly necessary or even a bit of a downgrade for Melmetal compared to its other moves. Surf on Jellicent I think has a unique role to play in that Jellicent is always played like a pseudo water type, I believe, in Great League and Ultra League, where it's taking advantage of like the defensive typings of water to give it matchups like good matchups against Talonflame, and giving it matchups against things like Galarian Stunfisk, but you're not actually able to do super effective damage in those matchups. You're doing neutral damage with the Shadow Balls or the Ice Beams, or if you are doing water type charge move damage, it's with Bubble Beam, which isn't very threatening damage-wise, it's just great for the debuffs over time, and if you want more consistent water damage output against things, especially like Galarian Stunfisk, you want to run Bubble instead as a fast move to fill that role, which slightly hurts your energy generation, which is one of Jellicent's stronger suits, just because having access to Shadow Ball, it's great to be able to get to that hard-hitting charge move pretty fast. But Surf gives you a slightly different option. You can run Shadow Ball and Surf, and that means that you can do much stronger damage against Galarian Stunfisk, means you can do much better against Bastiodon. It even gives you a slightly better, well, not a better bait option than Bubble Beam, but it's also can still work as a bait move against Pokemon that are scared of the Shadow Ball, like against Medicham and stuff like that. It can buy you a bit more time and a bit more energy if you are expecting something like a Medicham to be dropping shields in that situation. So I think that Surf on Jellicent is an overall positive addition to it, because it's not strictly a direct upgrade on the moveset that it's already got, but it's a different option of a different way to run Jellicent, because it really adds to this sense of Jellicent being not a complete box of tricks, but you don't know what it's going to be doing. It comes in and straight away you have to think, is it Hex or is it Bubble Beam? Not Bubble Beam, Bubble, because that's going to affect quite a few matchups on that fast move damage and how it adds up. And then you've got to think, is it got Ice Beam to threaten Flyers? Has it got Shadow Ball to threaten the Psychics and other Ghost types? Or has it got Surf to threaten Galarian Stunfisk and the ground types? So you've really got to think about Jellicent more when you're faced with it, because you don't know what moveset it's going to be running. And I think that that alone makes Jellicent more viable than it already was, because it makes it more unpredictable for an opponent to read and to know what to expect from you. And that goes a long way in something like Go Battle League, like catching an opponent off guard with the moveset that they think that you're not going to have can really pay off and really save you in some matchups. So I'm all for Jellicent getting Surf. I think it's a great addition to it, but again, it's not necessary to run. Jellicent does just fine without it, but it's not a downgrade by any measure either. Ooh, also the other move that a Pokemon got access to was Whimsicott got access to Fairy Wind, which I think is going to be quite interesting, because Whimsicott was already on the verge of being a very meta-relevant pick, I think, in the Great League. Myself, I really like Whimsicott's kind of play and typing up to this point already, and I think Fairy Wind's only going to help it be a little bit more versatile overall. Yep, it's still going to watch out for the Flyers, and the Flyers are still dominant right now, but if you can keep it away from those matchups specifically, Whimsicott's got a lot of play, and I would recommend giving it a go as well. This team, by the way, that I chucked together for this video for these first 4 or 5 sets of Go Battle League was just for a bit of fun. I wanted to try both Melmetal and Jellicent at the same time on the same team, both without their new moves, just to have this chat with you guys about what I think about these new moves. It's not the most serious, hardcore team, but it did do reasonably well for me. If you want to improve the team, I would recommend Registeel instead of Melmetal, because, as we've said, Melmetal just doesn't quite measure up next to Registeel in the Great League and Ultra League. It's just not quite as strong, as bulky, as versatile as that Registeel. Pelipper's a great Say Swap, as per usual, and taking advantage of that recently buffed wing attack. But yeah, the team's a lot of fun to play, to be honest. I don't get to play Melmetal very much anymore. I don't really use it all that often, and it was nice to have an excuse to dust it off and give it a bit of a go. Same for Jellicent. I think Jellicent's going to see a bit of a resurgence this season as people start experimenting with Surf and the other movesets that it's already got access to. But yeah, this team worked out reasonably well. It kind of struggled a little bit more with some of the more hardcore meta teams I was coming up against. There were a few times where I battled a few players that had been Legend ranked previously, and obviously they're bringing much more well-balanced, stronger teams overall with much more meta Pokemon, and Melmetal can struggle to keep up in those matchups because, like we said, without if Double Iron Bash was a much more energy-efficient move that could improve some of those matchups, it'd be looking a lot better for it, but overall it was struggling a little bit to keep pace. Pelipper and Jellicent both did really, really well, and there's just the odd time that the team kind of falls apart from certain picks, like Trevenant can be a bit of a problem for this team, but it wasn't really a well thought out team. It's not. I'm not playing this team to be like, this is the best team ever and you should run this line specifically. It's just a team that I was having a bit of fun with. Surprisingly, Jellicent and Melmetal make quite a strong pairing, as Jellicent would with Registeel as well, just because, you know, the water to cover some of the harder counters to that steel typing, also the ghost typing to be resisting the fighting moves from things like Metacham. Of course, Obstagoon is a pretty decent core breaker for both Melmetal and Jellicent, but you can force shields from Melmetal in that matchup using the superpower. And of course, Pelipper covers that middle ground very, very nicely as a safe swap in a lot of situations, because you're doing good damage to the fighters, you're doing good damage to the ground types, you're resisting a lot of the water typings like Swampert and things like that. So on paper, the team sounds pretty solid. And like I said, I think it's just the execution of it where it's, I think in a few matchups, it's more like the stat product of these Pokemon that lets the lineup down, where it just can't quite keep pace with the top tier of the Great League. I always love the first few days of a new season of Go Battle League, because you get to have some more interesting matchups against people that are mixing it up a little bit more, and you're all kind of chucked in together. Some of the top tier players and some of the lower tier players are all able just to mix up against each other, and you're not just got the same hardcore 4-5 Pokemon in cycle all against each other, because not all these players have access to these Pokemon. And it's surprising, you'll run a hard meta team in the first couple of days, and someone will run an unusual Pokemon that just so happens to core break you. And as if you're up in like the high 2000 ELOs run up towards Legend rank, it's a Pokemon you don't have to worry about because nobody's running it. But when you're down in the trenches like this, again, when everybody's all mixed in together, you're going to run into a wider variety of Pokemon, and your team has to account for that, or you're going to get caught out by Pokemon that you might not normally be getting caught out by once you are like up towards like Veteran and Expert and Legend rank. So a lot of fun first few days, and I've always enjoyed it, so I do like trying to mix it up and try something new as well myself to get a feel for some new Pokemon as well. Thank you guys, by the way, for sticking around this long and listening to me rant about the Great League meta. I know I can go off on tangents and kind of go around in circles a little bit about these things, but thank you guys for sticking around for this long and listening to me chat. I'm not going to go into talking about this last set of battles here and talking about the nuances of each matchup and stuff like that. I'm just going to leave them here for you guys to check out if you want. As always, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe. We've got tons of videos on the channel talking about all the different leagues and teams and ideas and strategies for all these different cups that are coming and going. So be sure to subscribe to keep up with the new cups that are in for this season, because we are seeing a few different new metas being introduced in this season of Go Battle League, which we will be covering and trying to build teams for. If you got any thoughts about the new moveset changes for this season, be sure to let me know down below. And of course, if you're already subscribed to the channel, you are an absolute legend, and I will catch you guys next time.